All rise. You're in the Pabst Blue Ribbon Gateway Buick GMC Kings Court on 1380 TalkSTL.com.
Sounds like a Redskins theme.
Hail to the Redskins.
Yes, sir. Hail to the Redskins. And all you do-gooders out there who think they should change their nickname. Screw you. Hail to the Redskins. F off everybody else. This is the Pabst Blue Ribbon Gateway Buick GMC Kings Court. Kevin Slayton with you on a Friday afternoon, a rainy day here in St. Louis. Right here on 1380 AM and TalkSTL.com. John Ziegler from FramingPaternal.com joins us. Hello, John.
Hey, Kevin. It's interesting that you played the Redskins theme music because I also run RedskinsT-shirt.com, which people should definitely check out for the funniest parody T-shirt on the incredibly stupid Redskins controversy. So it's good to talk to you.
You know, you and I might be the smartest people in the world, or without question,
the dumbest.
Well, I don't think we even approach the dumbest because
No, it's true.
well, you know, I mean, for us to be the dumbest means we're dumber than 98% of the American race.
That's true.
But I think not only are we the smartest, but we are the most commonsensical, if there's such a phrase, people on the face of the earth with the balls to say so.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's such a rare commodity in this
Yes.
day and age. But we're living in pretty scary times where no one has any balls to say anything. And in fact, it's my belief that the truth actually has a far less of a chance of being talked about in public than lies do, because lies are convenient and can be crafted to appeal to the media or to the general public, the stupid morons out there. But the truth oftentimes has no real capital behind it, and that's why I'm glad you're around, and thanks for having me on.
Well, we're thankful to have you, John, and God, thank God that both of us are alive. But if they could have any say in it, they'd make sure that wasn't the case. We may get into a little bit of the Brady situation, but before we do that, there is a petition filed in Centerport, Pennsylvania, where Jerry Sandusky has a new law firm that's representing him on this appeal, and not really an appeal, but it's a motion for a new trial. And in this motion, I'm reading from the actual transcript. During the prosecutor's closing argument, and this is during the original trial of Sandusky on which he was found guilty on many counts, here's what the prosecutor said. I don't want to tug at your heartstrings. I want to remind you of what the substance of this case is about, because it's what happened to those boys. You know what? Not just those boys, and this is where he really goes off the rail, to others unknown to us, to others presently known to God but not to us, but we know what the defendant did to them because adults saw them and adults told you about them. Now, knowing as much as I do about this, and I don't know nearly as much about the actual trial as you do, this blew me out of the water. When you sent me this transcript today and I read it, I almost choked on my salad. As a lawyer, I can't imagine another lawyer, but prosecutorial misconduct is rampant in this country, but I can't imagine a prosecutor making that statement in a closing argument knowing full well that he was lying when he made the statement.
Well, he was lying. It was also obviously inappropriate to refer to crimes that were not alleged at the trial.
You cannot refer, by the way, folks, you cannot refer to crimes that aren't even on trial in a closing argument or any other type of argument. You can't refer to them because they're not on trial. This guy not only referred to them, John, he accused Sandusky of being guilty of them and, in fact, closed the door and said, people have told you he's guilty of them.
Well, you're referring to Joe McGettigan's closing. And, I realize to people who have not followed this, what I'm going to be talking about today is going to be a lot to swallow.
But before you do that, let me say this to those people that have not followed this. If this can happen to Sandusky, it can happen to you. Yes. So pay attention, because this goes on every day in every courtroom in America. This is what happens in this so-called justice system.
Well, just your listeners ought to think about hands up, don't shoot. Just think about hands up, don't shoot.
It's never happened.
And then relate it to what happened here. Just to finish the thought on McGettigan's closing, one of the first pieces, Kevin, that made me start to go, wait a minute, none of this fits. And I think you will agree, just from the short little segment there that you read from the transcript, McGettigan's closing sounds like that of a defense attorney who has no case and is simply appealing to emotion, right? Normally, the prosecutor who has a locked, dead, solid case is talking about facts. He's talking about logic. He is it's hardcore. That's not what McGettigan does here. His closing argument is a mess, and it sounds like that of a defense attorney who has no case. Interestingly, if you would look at Joe Amendola, who's much maligned and understandably so,
yes, he is.
His closing argument actually sounds like that of a prosecutor, because he's constantly talking about the facts. He's constantly talking about logic. He's not appealing to emotion at all. Frankly, I think he should have appealed more to emotion. So everything about this case, from the Joe Paterno angle, which is what got me involved in this and got you involved in this, to the Jerry Sandusky element, to the Penn State administrators, everything that's gone along with it. Every element of it, Kevin, is upside down. Every single bit. Every single thing you think you know is either false or totally false, and things that have been portrayed as evidence of guilt among all the people who were accused here, I believe are actually very strong pieces of evidence when seen in the proper prism as evidence of innocence. And I understand it's startling to people who haven't followed it, because the news media has been lockstep in this false narrative since day one, but this is how and why a perfect storm happens. And again, I allude to hands up, don't shoot. This is hands up, don't shoot, plus Duke lacrosse, plus UVA rape case. That's what the Penn State case is and was, and I'm positive of it. And this week, we released enormous amounts of information, both through my website, framingpaterno.com, as well as Jerry Sandusky's appeal, which I believe proves that. And I hope you also took a look, Kevin, at the startling revelation of the transcript of the interview with the so-called janitor in this case. Did you see that?
I did, and not only that, but as we go further into this petition for a new trial, people need to understand the grand jury system. The grand jury system is a secretive system, and it's supposed to remain that way. And when there are leaks of grand jury information, and in this case, the leaks were tantamount to turning the tide in this trial. There would not have been any so-called, and I say so-called because I am now, it's taken me a long time, John, but I am now of the belief, and I share it with you, that Sandusky is innocent. I don't believe any of this crap took place based on the facts that you've provided me with, based on the leak of the grand jury information when the prosecution could not find any victims, so-called victims, could not find any, so they decided to leak the information that there was a grand jury hearing going on into Sandusky, and all of a sudden, magically, victims appeared out of everywhere. Every corner, every freaking cave, they all showed up all of a sudden, many with the same lawyer.
Kevin, well, first of all, let me commend you for having the courage to say what you just did. And I know you've done this after a lot of research, and you wanted to make sure. I think you've had your suspicions, but you wanted to make sure, and I applaud that. I think that's fantastic. But I hope people will understand the significance of someone like yourself making that statement, and they'll find out the facts for themselves at framingpaterno.com as to why we've come to this conclusion. And by the way, as you know, Kevin, I didn't come to this conclusion lightly either. After I interviewed Sandusky the first time in prison and went on the Today Show, where basically I said he was guilty, although I tried like hell to avoid the question from Matt Lauer because I had my suspicions, but Franco Harris had urged me strongly to not say anything along those lines, because my fight at that point, Kevin, as you know, was Joe Paterno.
Right.
And so I'm very loyal to Franco Harris. And so, but after that, I spent a year of my life against all self-interest, not getting paid and not a chance in the world of this ever benefiting me, trying to disprove my suspicions. And the further I got into this, Kevin, the more certain I was that my gut was telling me the truth, that this whole case is bullcrap. Now, let me go to specifically your issue of the grand jury leaks, because how it got leaked is incredibly important here. It got leaked through a 24-year-old female reporter by the name of Sarah Ganem. She had been on the job at her tiny Pennsylvania newspaper for 3 months. For 3 months at 24.
So you're telling me they didn't leak it to Walter Cronkite. They leaked it to Sarah Ganem.
Right, who they knew. Ambitious young reporter who's going to just buy hook, line, and sinker, who's going to do their bidding for them. She doesn't know any better. And not only does she do their bidding by putting it in the newspaper. And by the way, yes, there were people who came forward at that time, but nowhere near the avalanche you would have thought if this was real. It took a long time for the real avalanche doesn't occur until after Joe Paterno was fired, and every trial lawyer in the state knows that Fort Knox is wide open for business. But I understand your point. But let's go back to Sarah Ganem for a second. So this inexperienced reporter who ends up winning a Pulitzer Prize somehow, and who, by the way, now works at CNN. Since she's on CNN, she has not broken one story at all. The last we saw of her, she was doing snow coverage in Boston this winter.
Beautiful.
So it's not as if she's some sort of journalistic prodigy.
Did she get that right? That's the question. Did she get the snow coverage right?
Well, I'll leave that for. I was going to make a joke about her measuring inches, but that's another, for another story for another day. But because by the way, victim number one's mother in this case has told people, and I have this on record, that Sarah Ganem was sleeping with someone in the AG's office to get that leak, and I have a suspicion as to who that was. I can't prove it at this point, but let's just say it's someone extremely high up
so we potentially,
in the hierarchy there, and it would explain an awful lot if in fact true. But let's go back to what we know for sure. So Ganem, we have a text message, and the prosecution had to stipulate to this at trial that Ganem, in the middle of all this, had contacted the mother of one of the alleged accusers and told them that if they don't come up with more accusers, the case is going to get dropped, and oh, by the way, here's the name and number of an investigating agent. Can you please contact them? She's not a journalist. She's an agent for the prosecution. And she has been from day one of this case, and yet she ends up winning the Pulitzer Prize, which, of course, is a joke. I emailed every member of the jury on her Pulitzer Prize committee, and that's what they call it, a jury, and gave them this information, and not one of them even bothered to get back to me because no one cares.
Why should they respond?
Journalism is dead in this country.
It's dead. Dead. This leak is so important because, John, at the time this leak took place, there were no real accusers of Sandusky. We had the McQueary incident, which, by the way, I just want to make certain that people understand this. This kid who was in the so-called showers at Penn State, which is the one that gets all of the coverage.
Right.
This is a guy who told investigators as an adult that nothing took place, that Jerry Sandusky was like a father to me, that he saved my life, basically. Yep. And that night that Mike McQueary claimed something was going on, we were goofing around. We just worked out. We're taking a shot. We're snapping towels at each other. Well, hell, everybody does that. I mean, that's been done before. We're snapping towels at each other, nothing more, nothing less. He's never done anything sexually toward me. He's never done anything inappropriately toward me. Somehow, after that testimony, he flips. And all of a sudden now he smells that wonderful scent of greenbacks. And all of a sudden, he's got a lawyer.
Well, that lawyer is an incredibly important person. That lawyer is a guy by the name of Andrew Shubin. Andrew Shubin has represented at least 9 of the accusers in this case. He's made millions of dollars in this case. According to Jerry Sandusky's petition that was unsealed this week, he basically took that person you're referring to.
I think the petition's a bombshell.
Oh, I agree, but of course we're living in a world where bombshells don't go off if the media doesn't want them to. But so this person's name is Alan Myers. I've referred to him on your show before. According to the petition, this is new information to me. Shubin essentially, I don't think this is an exaggeration, according to the petition, takes Myers hostage and makes sure that the prosecution and the defense cannot get to him before or during the trial, so he never testifies. And here's the really important part. So it turns out that Shubin knows Myers from well before the firestorm. He represented him in not one but 2 DUIs. Alan Meyer's mother used to work for Andrew Shubin. So here's what really happened here. Shubin, after Joe Paterno is fired, he starts advertising on his website for Jerry Sandusky victims. He realizes either through the mom or the grapevine or whatever it is that this guy Alan that he knows not only is a potential Sandusky accuser, but he's the Sandusky accuser. He's the boy in the McQuarrie episode. So he goes to Alan and convinces Alan, maybe even, by the way, convinces him sincerely that he was actually abused, even though there was never any actual sex. Maybe he convinces him he was being targeted or groomed or whatever it is. But more importantly, he says, you know what? You're unemployed. You got 2 DUIs. You're out of the Marine Corps now. I'm going to make your life easy. Just shut the hell up. And that's exactly what happens. He never testifies. The defense is afraid to call him. The prosecution's terrified to call him because, by the way, he didn't just give an investigator of Jerry Sandusky's attorney a statement, which is on our website at framingpaterno.com, which you and I have talked about many times. But he also had given an interview to police 2 months before that, where he's just as unequivocal that nothing had ever occurred, and in fact ends the interview by saying, I feel like you're trying to get me to lie, and you're never going to get me to say anything bad about Jerry Sandusky.
Even though later he did.
Right. Well, later, because I don't think he realized that there was going to be millions of dollars in it for him.
But, John, let me stop you momentarily. When you say that he was not called at trial, the prosecution stated in front of a jury that they didn't know where he was. He was only known, his whereabouts were only known to God. That somehow they didn't know where he was. Everyone knew where he was.
Exactly. But here, and that's a great point, Kevin, and I'm glad you mentioned it because it's an important point legally for appeal because it shows that the prosecution was engaged in willful misconduct. What they'll try to claim is, well, we didn't know for sure that he was the kid in the shower. Well, of course they didn't know because they didn't want him to be the kid in the shower because his story didn't fit with their narrative. Let's use your brain for a second. It's the most famous or infamous case of alleged child sexual molestation in the history of the country, if not the world, and everybody knows there's millions of dollars at stake by this point, by the time the trial comes around. And you mean to tell me the real kid never comes forward? So your theory here is that even though this kid is the only one that came forward, and by the way, he knows things that only the kid in the shower could know. I mean, because his statement on November 9th, 2011, the day Joe Paterno got fired, has information in it that only the kid could know. And so no one else comes forward despite all this publicity, all this money, and the prosecution will try to absurdly claim that, well, we weren't sure it was him. No, they said he was unknown only to God or known only to God because they didn't want him to be known to the jury because what he said exonerates everybody, exonerates Jerry Sandusky, it exonerates Joe Paterno, it exonerates the Penn State administrators, but the news media has unfortunately also engaged in willful misconduct because I waived that statement from Alan Myers on the Today Show to Matt Lauer and screaming literally bloody murder, and not one news media outlet even followed up with me on it because it doesn't fit what they want the truth to be. Of
course not. Matt Lauer's too busy wanting to know what Martha Stewart's cooking in the next segment, so he's not going to pursue it. And let me recap this so that people understand the gravity of this. This is the guy that supposedly started this whole ball rolling. The Mike McQuarrie testimony. Mike McQuarrie goes to Joe Paterno. Joe Paterno goes to his superiors. This is the kid who was in the shower with Jerry Sandusky having sex. The sex never occurred, according to the kid, in several statements. Then later he flips and says, well, wait a minute. Yeah, it did because I want money. And yet even at trial after he flips, even though he doesn't testify, even though the prosecution said his whereabouts are known only to God, he is Sandusky, that means, he is exonerated and found and acquitted and not guilty on that particular charge. That's the one that got the whole thing rolling. The rest of these people didn't come out until the grand jury testimony was leaked that there was a grand jury investigating Jerry Sandusky. We need victims. Now, all of a sudden, victims come out. How does anybody not follow this? To me, it's the bouncing ball on top of the lyrics to the song. Just follow it.
It's really not that complex, Kevin. The problem is this. Once Joe Paterno gets fired, and by the way, it's important that you just did a great job analyzing this, but I'll add one more thing, and it's in the petition. We now have Mike McQueary's grand jury statement, which is not what that leaked presentment said it was. It's far, far more ambiguous and vague than the infamous indictment and the presentment, which claimed that somehow McQueary had seen Jerry Sandusky anally raping a 10-year-old boy. By the way, for the record, the kid was 14, and McQueary clearly said in the grand jury that he was not sure that that's what he saw, that it was far more vague than what the prosecution said that it was. But here's the problem. Once Paterno is fired, everybody, two things, presumes, well, there must not be anything to discuss here, because why would Penn State be stupid enough to fire the legend Joe Paterno unless those people were sure what they were doing and were sure that somebody was guilty of something horrible that would never happen? And by the way, that's a fairly logical way of looking at it, except it's not true.
Well, this is what happens, John. This is what happens in cases like this. People see, well, Kevin and John, you can talk about this guy, but there were several other victims, so how could he be innocent of all of this? And that's what prosecutors do. They simply try to pile on so that you'll find somebody guilty of something, even though he's guilty of nothing. And then this is how I analogize this to the Brady situation now. This is the most bizarre. If you thought the Free Report was bad, this Wells report tops them all, baby. I call it the Harry Carey claim. It might be, it could be, it isn't.
Well, let's talk about that in a second, because I'm curious about your view of my take on the Wells report. But just to finish that second point about why people aren't following this, and again, because one of the elements here is that the news media won't help them do it. But this is obviously, it's not a case that people want to delve into. It's obviously the worst subject in the world. I didn't want to delve into this, but once you do delve into it, it is, as you described, it's very obvious and clear what really happened here. I have said, Kevin, and I believe it with all my heart, that if I got all of the accusers of Jerry Sandusky in one room together, in 20 minutes, I would have several of them in tears recanting, and the others would be scared out of their minds that they were going to jail or they were going to lose their money. And the reason is this. Here's what the essence of what I think happened. This is important for people to understand. This is not a conspiracy, and this was not even that difficult to have happen.
It's really not.
Once, and this is, as you said at the beginning of this is why it's more important than Jerry Sandusky or Joe Paterno or Penn State, because it's so incredibly easy in this day and age for this to happen to anybody. But here's what happens. Once everybody buys into McQueary and victim number one, Aaron Fisher, that they must be telling the truth, and they're verified by Penn State, and the firing of Joe Paterno, and the media is telling everybody that this is true. Once that's the case, then in the minds of all of these other potential accusers, well, Jerry's a pedophile, and Jerry's going to jail, and Jerry deserves to go to jail, so if I say something that's not really true, it doesn't matter, because I'm not going to have blood on my hands putting my friend Jerry in prison. I'm just going to get a piece of the pie that I deserve because I don't got a dad, my mom's a drunk, I got no money, life sucks, but I'm a friend of Jerry, so this is my lottery ticket.
And in the case of Aaron Fisher, I've been molested by my own dad, so why don't I just put that blame on Jerry Sandusky where I can get some money for it?
Well, that's an incredibly plausible scenario because the news media has, literally completely ignored it. But the number one victim in this case, the primary accuser, the only accuser for 2 years, Aaron Fisher, after the trial, had his stepfather plead guilty to 100 counts of child molestation with, by the way, real evidence, videos, photographs, corroborating witnesses, a co-conspirator, all real evidence that didn't exist in the Sandusky case, including, by the way, molestation of his own child. He pleads guilty to that, and yet somehow that's not at all even theoretically connected.
Right.
Which, by the way, think about it this way, Kevin. And I'm not 100% sure it's connected, but it's the most amazing coincidence in the history of the world that poor Aaron Fisher had back-to-back parental figures, because that's what his stepdad was and that's what Jerry Sandusky was, back to back in his life, be serial, horrendous, criminal pedophiles.
Either he is the unluckiest human being that God ever created, or he's a flicking liar.
Well, I'll tell you this. I have spoken to about a dozen people very close to Aaron Fisher, several on the record, which you can find at framingpaterno.com, girlfriends of his, teammates of his, classmates of his, and Kevin, you would think that in a case this toxic, where the news media is telling you that Jerry Sandusky is the worst person in the world, Aaron Fisher's a hero. The Philadelphia Inquirer just did a puff piece on him this past weekend, ripping me, calling me a conspiracy theorist. Having Aaron Fisher claim that he was eager to meet me and shake my hand like a man, which he immediately backed down from when I confronted him about it, because I said to Aaron this week, I said, hey, buddy, when we meeting? Let me know. Give me a time and a place. I'm there.
Shake your hand. You mean shake your hand in between his pictures of himself and his girlfriends lavishing through a pile of money on a bed in a hotel room that they got from Penn State.
Exactly. But when I speak to these people, Kevin, you would think there would be hesitancy, right? As toxic as this is, they'd be like, well, his story doesn't seem right, or I'm not just sure. No. Kevin, when I speak to these people who know him and know his mom, it's not even close. They say to me, John, I'm positive he's lying. I'm 100% sure of it. There's not a and these are, by the way, girlfriends of his during the investigation, during even some of the alleged abuse.
You know, John, I've racked my brain to figure out who I think is the most reprehensible in this case. Do I believe it is the Free group, Louis Free at the head of that group? Do I believe it's people like Aaron Fisher and these scumbags who, and I say scumbags now because I have been convinced by the evidence that this not only needs a new trial, but it needs a fair trial. Not a new trial like the other one, but a fair trial where prosecutorial misconduct's not involved to a fair. Well, those people should be disbarred, by the way. And then is it the Penn State people that fired Joe Paterno and gave credence to all of this nonsense?
Well, it's a long list, and I've thought about that list myself, Kevin. I'll put one out there that I've been battling this week. I think the mother of Aaron Fisher is at the heart of how and why this happened. I believe that the mother of Aaron Fisher had participated in a prior case involving her brother, where she helped get her brother a settlement in a case that was referred to as the Dr. Barry Bender case in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That was a very similar case, had the exact same lead detective that suddenly appeared on the Sandusky case at her house after it had been going nowhere for too long. If you read my post at framingpaterno.com, I think I make an extremely compelling case. This was the origins of the entire scandal. And instead of when her son, Aaron, starts to make these very mild, very vague claims, you would think that any rational, normal mother, her concern would be for her son, right? You would think that it would be about making sure that he was not really abused, or if that he was, that there was some sort of real justice in this case. Instead, I have numerous witnesses who say immediately that her concern was about making money from the Sandusky case, because she had done it previously in the Dr. Barry Bender case. And then, since this post has come out, Kevin, tell me if you think this is the reaction of a real mother, but of a mother who really felt as if her son had been abused. Because frankly, I think any mother would be thrilled that someone like me was trying to convince her that her son was not sexually abused for 3 years under her watch as a teenager, which is currently the conventional wisdom. You would think that any mother would be jumping for joy. Thank you, John Ziegler, for vindicating me as the worst mother in the history of the world. But instead, I'm the enemy. She's expressed more anger towards me than she ever did towards Jerry Sandusky.
Of course.
And this week, since my post came out, shared, by the way, by 1,700 people on Facebook, which is impossible unless people know that Aaron Fisher is lying in that community, and that's why they're sharing it with such incredible speed. But since that post has come out, Dawn Fisher, his mother, although that's not her real name, she's been married like 14 times, but Dawn, the mother, is in total meltdown. She has attempted, apparently successfully, to get one of my interviewees fired from his job. She has physically stalked another of my interviewees. She's gone on profanity-laced, seemingly drunken-induced tirades on Facebook. This is not the response of a person, first of all, who is credible, or second of all, it has been wronged, because it's not, her response is not substantive, it's not sensical, it doesn't make any sense based upon her own scenario, and I'm positive that her meltdown and Aaron's meltdown is because I've figured out what's happened. And for the first time in this case, they have felt real pressure.
Well,
they know people in their community know that they are lying, and they feel like the walls are starting to close in on them, and then frankly, TV shows have been made on what happens when white trash faces real pressure, and that's what's happening with the Fishers right now.
You've got to understand, John, you represent a threat to their money. So when you represent a threat to their money that they've extorted out of Penn State, and Penn State caved in far too easily, we all know that. And I almost get the side for Penn State is that let's just get this out of here. We can't live with this anymore. Let's pay these people. And yet it was a payment paid with blood money that never should have been paid. When you look at the petition, people, all I do is say, look at the petition. Read these reports. Don't sit there and listen to the media. Have a frickin' mind of your own, or shut your frickin' mouth. If you don't want to comment on it, fine. If you comment on it, do your homework. Otherwise, shut up, because you are an ignorant ass if you don't read the pertinent information. And this petition spells out how this trial was a farce, a joke, prosecutorial misconduct all over the place. And that, to me, is a disgrace to the legal system. And as I said, that prosecutor should be disbarred immediately, but he won't be. Duke Lacrosse, they did. At Duke Lacrosse, congratulations to the Carolina court system. They disbarred that son of a bitch.
Well, amen to you, Kevin. And let's go one back to the petition one more time, because this is really important, and it goes back to Penn State and Joe Paterno, and that's this issue of the janitor. Because to me, the biggest bombshell as far as new evidence, and by the way, your listeners were the very first people to learn about this, because I told them about this through you a couple of months ago, and I've been vindicated, as I've been throughout this whole case, is that there is a transcript of the janitor, the so-called janitor episode, which was made a huge deal out of by Louis Freeh. Huge deal. This was proof, remember, of the Penn State football culture. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So we now know that the janitor, who never testified at trial because he allegedly had dementia, did give an interview to prosecutors. And by the way, why, if you're the prosecutors, do you interview a guy if you know he has dementia? My suggestion is that they didn't know he had dementia until he gave the following response to the question, was it Jerry Sandusky that you saw that night? And not once, not twice, but 3 times he says, no, it was not Jerry Sandusky. Well, at that moment, it is my view that the prosecutors say, oh, thank you, Mr. Calhoun, for your time. We didn't realize you have dementia. We will not be needing you to testify at the trial.
That's right.
So to be clear here, Jerry Sandusky was convicted on 5 counts, 5 out of 45, of major offenses in a case where there was no contemporaneous report, there was no victim, there was no date, and the only direct witness was on record saying that Jerry Sandusky was not the person they saw. If that doesn't scare the living daylights out of you, I don't know what does.
John Ziegler from FramingPaterno.com. We put the Sandusky case to rest.